My daughter stood up at Thanksgiving dinner and said, "I want to thank everyone who has been of great help to me until now." Everyone cheered her on. Then she added, "Obviously not the old man who calls himself my dad. I really wish he wasn't. To tell you the secret, I've never respected him because I feel lucky to have a stepdad who is better than him." Everyone laughed and mocked me. I didn't react. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, if you enjoy stories like this, you want to be part of the 10% of our viewers who click on the like button. This really makes us happy. If you are yet to subscribe to our channel, kindly support us today by subscribing to this channel. This helps us to bring you more beautiful stories. It will be great to tell us where you are watching us from in the comments section. Now let's get into the details of the story. It was my house, my table, my food. Every year, Thanksgiving was the one holiday I insisted on keeping traditional. No matter how fractured the family felt, no matter how much time or distance had wedged itself between us, I always opened my doors. I wanted to believe the ritual of gathering, of breaking bread together, might be enough to hold us together just a little longer. My daughter, Leah, had always been the center of attention during these dinners. I don't know if it was because she was the only girl, or because I spoiled her more than I ever admitted out loud, but she knew the spotlight would naturally fall on her. And that night, she seized it with both hands and a cruel smile. Dinner had mostly settled down. Plates were nearly cleared, the laughter had become more fluid, and the wine was doing its job of smoothing over the cracks in everyone's carefully managed masks. I was just about to get up and refill the cranberry sauce when she stood, graceful in that practiced, confident way her mother used to move, back when we were still married. "I want to say something," she said, clinking her glass gently with a spoon. All eyes turned to her, including mine, though my heart stuttered. She'd been distant lately, colder, more transactional with her words, but I thought maybe, just maybe, she was about to say something kind. Something that made this whole thing worth it. "I want to thank everyone who has been of great help to me until now," she said with a soft smile. Everyone clapped. I felt myself exhale a little. Maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe she did still see me, still appreciate me. Then she added, too casually, "Obviously not the old man who calls himself my dad. I really wish he wasn't." Laughter rang out around the table like a dropped dish. I blinked, thought maybe I'd misheard. Then she added, louder this time, "To tell you the secret, I've never respected him. And honestly, I feel lucky to have a stepdad who's better than him in every possible way." The silence that followed was sharp enough to bleed. Then, awkward chuckles trickled in, like people weren't sure whether to laugh harder or look at me. But they laughed. Her husband laughed the loudest, face red with amusement, as if she'd just told the punchline of the year. My sister Dana chuckled nervously and gave me a half-hearted shrug like, "Don't take it personally." I didn't say a word. Not even when Leah sat back down with that smug little tilt of her chin, like she'd just delivered a toast worthy of applause. I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see my daughter. I saw someone who had made a choice, a cruel, deliberate choice to humiliate me. And in that moment, I made a decision too. I didn't slam my fist on the table. I didn't raise my voice or excuse myself with wounded dignity. I stayed seated, cutting the last piece of turkey on my plate into smaller and smaller bites I no longer had the stomach to eat. I let the room move on. Let the conversation resume. I even managed to nod at a joke someone made about cranberry sauce coming from a can. But my mind wasn't in the room anymore. It was already moving, calculating, unspooling every financial thread that tied Leah to me. Because she had made it perfectly clear she wanted nothing from me. No name, no legacy, no respect. So she wouldn't get a damn thing more. That night, long after everyone had gone and the leftovers were packed away in foil and plastic containers, I sat in my study with a glass of bourbon I didn't even want. I didn't cry. I didn't stew. I simply pulled out the file labeled Leah. Inside were copies of her lease agreement, signed under my company, property still in my name. There were also her employment papers. She worked under the HR division of one of my companies, a comfortable setup I had arranged when she said she needed flexibility while her husband found himself. All of it, every inch of her comfort, was built on the back of my sacrifices. And she spat on it, for a laugh. For attention, I picked up the phone and called my realtor first. I want the house at Maple Hollow listed immediately, I said. Don't care if it's the holidays. I want it out of my portfolio by Christmas. Then I called HR. Begin the formal documentation to terminate Leah Michaels effective next Monday. I'll sign whatever you need first thing tomorrow. Both ends of the calls hesitated, unsure if I was serious. I was dead serious. That girl wanted a life without the old man. She'd get it. Not in theory, not in teenage rebellion, but in action, in reality. And reality has bills. It has consequences. It doesn't laugh at the man who pays for your roof and then expect nothing to change. I went to bed that night and slept like a man who'd finally stopped bleeding for someone who never brought bandages. I didn't flinch when I passed the framed photo of Leah's college graduation in the hallway. Didn't pause at the wedding invitation she had once proudly mailed to me. These things used to hurt. They used to make me doubt myself, to wonder if I was hard to love. But not anymore. I saw things clearly now. You can love someone with your whole soul and still know when they're poison. And if they want to mock the hands that fed them in front of an audience, they can learn what hunger truly feels like. The next morning, I woke before the sun, the way I used to back when the kids were little and my workdays started before the house came alive. It had been years since I felt that familiar rhythm, the clarity that comes with a decision that no longer keeps you up at night. My coffee tasted stronger, sharper. The bitterness sat right on my tongue, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't add sugar. I didn't need it. There was something strangely purifying about being done with pretending. Pretending she respected me, pretending she deserved everything I gave her, pretending this family wasn't held together by duct tape and denial. No more illusions. The truth had spoken itself aloud at my own dinner table, and now the truth would live with its consequences. I didn't storm around the house or slam drawers like a man scorned. I moved with the kind of focus that only comes when anger has passed its boiling point and become something colder, sharper, resolve. I pulled the thick folder back out of the file cabinet, the one labeled in neat black ink with Leah's name. Not Leah, my daughter, just Leah. Because that's what she had reduced herself to, a line item in my life, a dependent who thought mockery came with no invoice. Inside the folder were mortgage statements, insurance records, and copies of the lease I had her sign when she and her husband moved into the house I owned on Maple Hollow Lane. I had been more than generous. I let them pay well below market rate, waived late fees, and even paid to repair their air conditioner last summer without so much as a thank you text. I stared at the paperwork and felt nothing. No guilt, no nostalgia, just facts. Cold, contractual facts that told me I was not the villain she painted me as. I was a man who had provided. And now I was done. By mid-morning, I was sitting in my office at the company's downtown building, reviewing her HR file. Her title was Administrative Coordinator, a job I had created when she claimed no other employers would give her a chance. They judge me for being too young, she'd said. They think I'm entitled because of my resume. She didn't mention that the resume included nothing but internships I helped arrange and references that were mostly family friends. I had bent over backward to keep her on payroll while she figured herself out. Let her work remotely. Let her leave early for personal growth appointments, which I later found out were just yoga classes. All of it, and she still had the gall to spit on my name. I forwarded the necessary documents to HR with a brief note. Begin the termination process. Grounds: redundancy, poor performance, and workplace insubordination. Position no longer required. They wouldn't question me. The company was mine, after all. I built it from the ground up after her mother left, after I decided I would not let divorce define the second half of my life. Every brick of this business was laid with sleepless nights, missed holidays, and meals eaten alone at my desk. And now she thought she could laugh at me, disown me publicly, and keep living off the legacy I built? No, not anymore. Around noon, I got a call from the realtor I had spoken to the night before. We can get it on the market next week, she said cheerfully. Holiday listings actually do surprisingly well, especially in that neighborhood. I told her I didn't care about the timeline, just that I wanted the house vacated. Send the eviction paperwork today, I said. They'll have 30 days. Make sure it's legal, airtight. No room for delays. The pause on the other end of the line told me she was about to ask a question, maybe something like, "Are you sure?" or "Do you want to wait until after the holidays?" But she didn't. She must have heard it in my voice. That door had closed. Locked. Bolted. When I got home that evening, I sat in my car for a long moment, staring at the house where Leah had grown up. I remembered late nights helping her with science projects, her sobbing into my chest after her first breakup, the way she used to run into my arms when I walked through the front door. And I let myself feel that ache, just for a moment. Not enough to drown in it, but enough to remember I had loved her once. Deeply, unquestionably. Then I reminded myself that love is not a leash. Love, when one-sided, becomes servitude, and I was no one's servant. Not anymore. I walked into the house and saw the framed photo still hanging in the hallway. Leah in her cap and gown, her arms around me, the smile on her face easy and real. I took it down, quietly. I didn't smash it or toss it. I simply placed it face down in a drawer in the study and closed it gently. Not out of rage. Out of respect, for myself. This wasn't about revenge. It was about peace. About creating a life where I wasn't the punching bag for someone who wanted my resources, but not my humanity. That night, I sat in the same chair she had mocked me in front of. I replayed the scene in my head, the smugness in her voice, the easy way the others laughed like I was just some sitcom character being roasted for the crowd's amusement. I had provided the meal, the setting, the roof, and they had used it as a stage to humiliate me. I had stayed silent out of dignity. But now, silence had become my strategy. Let her find out, day by day, how much of her life was built on the very foundation she spat on. I knew the storm was coming. The calls, the panic, the begging. But I also knew this. I wouldn't flinch. For the first time in years, I wasn't operating from guilt. I was standing on principle. And I was ready. 3 days later, the knock came early, louder than usual, urgent, sharp. The kind of knock that doesn't wait to be answered kindly. According to the property manager I'd assigned through the realtor, Leah had opened the door with a look of groggy confusion, barefoot, her hair pulled into one of those messy buns she always wore when she thought the world owed her sleep. She stood there in one of my old college sweatshirts, the one she used to steal from my closet when she was a teenager, acting like the world was soft and nothing would ever change. The man in the polo shirt with the company logo handed her the envelope and said only one thing. "You've got 30 days. Inside that envelope were eviction papers. Clear. Legal. Non-negotiable. The house on Maple Hollow Lane was no longer her safe haven. It wasn't a free launch pad. It was property, mine, and I had decided it was time she found her own way. According to the manager, her husband came down the stairs moments later, rubbing his eyes, phone already in hand. "Is this some kind of joke?" he reportedly asked, waving the papers like they'd caught fire. "You can't just kick us out." But he was wrong. I could. And I had. The audacity in his voice made me laugh when the property manager recounted it to me over the phone. They'd gotten so used to my generosity that it had grown into entitlement. They didn't just take my support, they expected it. I didn't respond to Leah's first 3 texts. They came rapid fire. "Dad, what's going on? Why is there a realtor sign going up in front of the house?" She was panicking, but still pretending to be confused, still trying to play innocent. But her voice, her actual voice, cracked when she called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Her tone dipped in that familiar whine she used when she wanted something but didn't want to own up to it. "Hey, I'm not sure what this is about," she said, trying to sound calm. "But I think maybe something got misfiled. Just call me back, okay?" I'm sure this isn't what it looks like. She still didn't get it. Still didn't realize that her little Thanksgiving performance had burned the last bridge standing. 2 hours later, her name showed up on the office intercom. She'd come to my building. Security called to confirm. I told them not to let her up. "Send her to HR," I said, not looking away from the spreadsheet in front of me. I could imagine her standing there in the marble-floored lobby, face flushed from frustration, realizing her keycard no longer worked. She had probably come to beg, or worse, to guilt me, maybe even play the victim. But I had no more patience for masks or performance. Let her learn what accountability felt like outside of family cushioning her falls. Later that afternoon, The HR manager confirmed she had been served with the formal termination letter. She hadn't taken it well. She'd cried, demanded to speak with me, threatened to go public, whatever that meant. Said things like, "This is personal. You can't fire me over a family argument." But she was wrong again. She was never truly qualified for the job to begin with. The position was created for her. There was no performance record worth defending. It wasn't personal, it was overdue. The company didn't know her just because she was my daughter. And I didn't know her either. Not after what she did. That evening, Dana, my sister, called me. I knew the tone before she even said a word. It was the peacemaker voice she always used after family drama. "Hey," she said gently, "I talked to Leah. She's really upset. I think she didn't mean it the way it came out." I almost laughed. She said I wasn't her real father. I replied, my voice calm. In front of everyone. She said she wished I wasn't. There was silence on the line for a moment. Then Dana sighed. She was emotional. You know how she gets. It was Thanksgiving, and she was drinking, and I cut her off. And now she's homeless and unemployed. That was her choice. Dana went quiet again. "You really mean to go through with this?" she asked. "You're really locking her out?" I stared out the window of my study. "No," I said slowly. She locked herself out. I just made sure the door stayed closed. The fallout began rolling in like thunder in the distance. Cousins started calling. A few aunts sent guilt-laced texts. "Is there something we can do to help mediate?" One wrote. "Family's messy, but it's all we've got." I didn't reply to any of them. Funny how no one had spoken up at dinner when she tore me down in front of everyone. No one had pulled her aside. No one had said, "That's too far." But now that the consequences were real, suddenly they wanted to play peacemaker. I wasn't interested. My silence at dinner had cost me something. But now, my silence was the blade I carried with quiet precision. By the end of the week, Leah had officially moved out. According to the realtor, she left behind a mess, literal and metaphorical. Dented walls, furniture scuffed, and a few broken picture frames. I didn't bother to inspect the damage myself. I told them to clear it, clean it, and list it above market. I wanted that chapter closed and sold. Her husband posted a vague status online about toxic family members and holding grudges over nothing. I didn't comment. I didn't need to. The people who mattered already knew the truth. And those who didn't, I wasn't wasting another breath convincing them. That night, sitting alone at my kitchen table, I stared at the same chair Leah had once occupied during every Thanksgiving since she was 6. For a long time, I thought I was keeping this family together. That my sacrifices, my silence, and my generosity were enough to glue over the cracks. But now I saw clearly, glue doesn't work when someone is actively chiseling at the seams. And love without respect isn't glue. It's bondage. The Monday after her termination, the office was quieter than usual, though maybe that was just my perception. How silence starts to feel louder when it's coming from the direction of someone you've cut off. I walked the halls of my own company like a man who'd finally stopped carrying someone else's burden, and people noticed. My assistant, Maria, didn't ask about Leah directly, but I caught the hesitation in her eyes when she brought in the morning briefing. Everyone knew. Office gossip traveled fast, and no one was surprised Leah had been let go. What did surprise them was that I, the man who had given her every possible advantage, had finally drawn the line and enforced it. Some respected it. A few called it heartless. I didn't care either way. I hadn't asked for their permission to reclaim my dignity. It didn't take long for Leah to realize how far-reaching the consequences would be. By Wednesday, I got word that she had tried contacting several managers she used to work under, begging them to speak on her behalf to HR or even to me directly. But they didn't. Not one. Most of them had never been impressed with her performance to begin with, and they'd only tolerated her because they thought I expected it. The moment they saw the leash had been cut, they stepped back and let her fall. One of the team leads even sent me an email thanking me for clearing space for someone who actually wanted the job. That one, I archived for later. It was brutal honesty, and I respected it. She came in person again that Friday. Security notified me before she even reached the front doors. "She's demanding to speak with you, sir. Claims it's urgent." I didn't even look up from my laptop. "Escort her out," I said calmly. "Document everything. If she causes a scene, file the report." I knew she wouldn't go quietly. Not Leah. She had grown up believing every no could be turned into a yes with enough dramatics. She had been trained, in part by me, to expect forgiveness on tap. But forgiveness without remorse is just enablement. I'd spent too many years mistaking one for the other. That was over now. I watched the footage later, her shouting in the lobby, her voice pitching higher with each sentence. "He's ruining my life," she screamed to the security guard. "This is personal. This is illegal." She threw her arms in the air and paced in a circle like the walls were closing in. I didn't enjoy watching it. This wasn't revenge. It was reality. This is what happens when people think they can spit on the people who raised them and still expect to drink from their wells. The world doesn't work like that. Not my world. That night, my youngest son, Ethan, came by unannounced. He'd always been quieter than Leah, more observant. Where she needed to be the center of every room, Ethan sat back and watched. He didn't usually insert himself into family conflict, which is why I knew what he had to say was important. We sat on the porch, both sipping iced tea while the autumn wind rolled lazily through the yard. He looked older than his 25 years in that moment, tired in a way I hadn't noticed before. "I heard what happened," he said finally. I didn't respond, just nodded. "She's telling people you snapped out of nowhere, that you're punishing her for speaking her truth." I laughed once, bitter and short. Her truth? That I'm not her father? That I'm some old man worth mocking at his own table? Ethan shrugged. "I'm not defending her. I'm just saying, that's what she's telling people. And I figured you should know." We sat in silence for a while after that. I could tell he was turning something over in his mind. Then he said, "For what it's worth." I didn't think it was funny. What she said. I saw your face when she said it. You didn't deserve that. That hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't even realized how much I'd needed one person, just one, to say that out loud. I looked at him and nodded again. "Thanks," I said quietly. I didn't know if anyone saw it. Felt it. He nodded back. I did. That moment didn't erase what Leah had done, but it softened something in me. Not toward her, but toward myself. For years, I had doubted whether I was being too hard, too cold, too business-minded in a house that demanded softness. But now I saw that the real damage hadn't come from my boundaries. It had come from not having enough of them. From letting her believe that love meant never saying no. That money would always come with a safety net. That family was a shield from consequence. I had taught her that, whether directly or through passivity, and now I was unteaching it, even if it hurt. Later that weekend, I got a message from my sister Dana again. She had been speaking to Leah behind the scenes. She sent a long text full of soft words and moral appeals. "She's your daughter," she wrote. "You only get one. What if she never comes back from this? What if you regret it later?" I didn't respond. I didn't have the energy to explain that this wasn't about one incident. It was about years of subtle digs, gaslighting, and emotional manipulation wrapped in a smile. It was about a pattern I'd ignored because she was my child. And that's what made it hurt more, not less. People talk a lot about parental love like it's unconditional. But I've learned the hard way. Unconditional love doesn't mean unconditional access. You can love someone and still protect yourself from them. You can miss who they used to be and still not invite who they've become into your life. I hadn't stopped loving Leah, but I no longer trusted her. And that distinction, that razor-sharp line between love and tolerance, was the only thing keeping me sane. The voicemail came late, almost midnight. I was sitting in the den with the TV on, but muted, the room lit only by the flicker of commercials I wasn't watching. I saw the call come in, her name glowing across the screen like it had so many times before. I didn't answer. I'd already played that game, the one where she cried and apologized without ever saying what she was sorry for. I let it ring. The icon blinked a moment later, one new voicemail. I didn't check it right away. I stared at the phone instead, wondering if it would bring closure or just reopen a wound that had already started to scab over. After 5 full minutes, I pressed play. "Dad." Her voice came in low and trembling, like she was trying hard not to cry, or maybe not to sound like she was crying. I know you're angry. I know what I said was cruel. I wasn't thinking. I was frustrated, okay? And people were watching, and I got caught up in the moment. But this," her voice cracked slightly, "this is too far. You've taken everything away from me. The house, the job. You're being sentimental, Dad. That's what this is. You're letting your feelings blow up my life. Can we please just talk? Please. You don't have to forgive me. Just don't destroy me over one night. Please. Then there was a pause. A long breath. I still love you. I'm just not perfect. But neither are you. The message ended with a soft sniff and the dull click of disconnection. I stared at the phone for a long time. Replayed the message twice. And still, there it was, that word again. Sentimental. As if my reaction to being publicly humiliated and discarded like an outdated coat was somehow emotional weakness. As if boundaries only existed to protect her, and when I used them, it was petty or dramatic. She didn't see the difference between consequence and cruelty. That was the problem. She still believed she was above it all. The next morning, I didn't call her back. I didn't respond to the follow-up text, either. Did you get my message? Yes, Leah. I got it. I heard every carefully chosen word, every shift in tone designed to make herself seem small and misunderstood. But there had been no accountability in her voice, just discomfort at being denied access. She wanted relief, not reconciliation, and I wasn't going to give it to her. Not this time. That afternoon, I met with my financial advisor. We reviewed my estate plan, and for the first time in nearly 2 decades, I made serious changes. Leah's name was removed from the primary trust. Instead, I allocated portions to Ethan, to my niece who was working her way through law school, and to a few charities I'd quietly supported for years. The advisor raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? He asked gently, fingers steepled under his chin. Your daughter. My daughter made her position clear. I interrupted. She doesn't want my name, my legacy, or my guidance. She can live without the rest, too. On my way home, I stopped by a local diner. It was the kind of place I hadn't been to in years. Greasy counter, clinking coffee mugs, and the smell of burnt toast in the air. I sat alone, ordered black coffee, and watched the world go by outside the window. People hustling, talking, laughing. No one knew who I was or what had just unraveled in my life. And for once, that anonymity felt like a kind of peace. For years, I'd been someone's father first, someone's provider, someone's fallback. Now I was just a man drinking coffee on a Tuesday, deciding what version of himself he wanted to be next. When I got home, the silence met me like an old friend. No missed calls, no new messages, just me and the quiet. I went to the hallway, opened the drawer where I'd stashed the old photo of Leah in her graduation gown. I took it out and stared at it, at her eyes, her smile, the way she leaned into me like I was the center of her world. That version of her was gone. Maybe she'd come back someday. Maybe not. But I had stopped waiting. That was the difference now. I missed her, sure, but I didn't ache for her. Not anymore. Later that night, Ethan stopped by again. He didn't say much. Just brought over a 6-pack and dropped into the recliner like it was his usual spot. We watched part of a game in comfortable silence, broken only by the occasional comment or sip of beer. At one point, he turned to me and said, I think you're doing the right thing. I didn't ask what he meant specifically. There were too many possible answers, but I nodded anyway. I'm just tired, I said. Tired of being made into the villain in a story I paid for. He raised his bottle. To peace, then. I clinked mine against his. To peace. It didn't fix everything, but it made the room feel warmer. A few days later, Leah posted a long, vague message on social media. Something about family being fake, loyalty being conditional, how money changes people. I didn't comment. Didn't even finish reading it. Let her scream into the void if she wanted. I had nothing left to defend. The people who knew me, really knew me, weren't buying her half-truths. And the people who did, they were welcome to stay out of my life, too. That's the thing people don't tell you about boundaries. They don't just protect you from others. They reveal who was only there because the door was always open. Once you close it, you see who knocks, who walks away, and who tries to kick it in. Leah had tried all three, and in doing so, she made her choice. Thanksgiving came again before I realized how quickly the year had unraveled. The days passed like dry leaves in the wind. Quiet, brittle, and unceremonious. It was the first time in decades that I didn't host the big family dinner. No house full of noise, no extra folding chairs dragged out from the garage, No warm buzz of conversation orbiting around Leah's dramatic retellings of minor inconveniences. This year, I chose something different. I invited only a handful of people. Ethan, my sister Dana despite everything, and an old friend named Charles who'd spent the last few holidays alone. I told them I didn't want anything big, just a quiet meal. Honest company. No performances. No speeches. I cooked most of the dinner myself. Nothing extravagant. Roasted chicken instead of turkey, mashed potatoes, green beans sautéed with garlic the way my mother used to make them. Ethan brought pie. Dana brought wine. And Charles brought a story about how he once caught a squirrel trying to open his mailbox. It was simple. It was light. And most importantly, it was real. There was no tension humming beneath the tablecloth. No waiting for someone to weaponize the spotlight. Just laughter that didn't come with consequences and silence that didn't feel like something was missing. For the first time, I realized Thanksgiving wasn't about family by blood. It was about peace by choice. There was a moment during dinner, right as we were pouring second helpings, when I glanced at the chair where Leah used to sit. I hadn't intentionally left it open. It just was. Empty, wooden, with a small scratch on the edge from when she was 13 and tried to carve her initials into it during a tantrum. For a split second, something stirred in me. Not regret, not longing, something quieter. A kind of mourning, not for who she was now, but for the version of her I had once loved so fiercely. The girl who used to bring me handmade cards with glitter glue that stuck to my fingertips. The teenager who, after her first heartbreak, cried into my chest like I was the only solid thing left in the world. That version had been gone a long time. I had just refused to admit it. After dinner, Dana lingered behind while Ethan and Charles cleaned up in the kitchen. She poured us both another glass of wine and leaned against the counter, eyes softer than they'd been in months. You know, she said gently, I thought you were being harsh. I'll admit that. I thought this was punishment. But you seem lighter. Happier, even. I sipped my wine, letting the words settle before I answered. I was trying to carry something that didn't want to be held, I said. And I finally realized the weight wasn't love, it was guilt. And guilt isn't a good enough reason to let someone keep hurting you. She nodded slowly. Have you thought about reaching out? Just once. See if she's changed. I met her eyes. She changed before I ever did. I'm just matching energy now. Dana sighed, but not in frustration. It was a release. Maybe even agreement. I miss her too. You know, she whispered. But I miss the girl who used to look up to you like you hung the moon. I smiled faintly. So do I. But that girl doesn't exist anymore. And I can't keep throwing lifelines to someone who mocks the hands that offer them. Dana didn't press further. She just hugged me before she left, longer than usual. Maybe it was her way of saying she finally understood. A week later, the house on Maple Hollow Lane sold. Above asking price, too. I watched the new owners pull up in a red SUV with their young kids, balloons tied to the side mirror, the mother crying as she walked through the front door. I stayed in the car across the street, just long enough to see the lights flicker on. The house had found a new life. A clean slate. I hoped, in some distant corner of my heart, that Leah had found something too. Not comfort, not an escape, but perspective. The kind that only arrives after enough doors close and the noise fades long enough for truth to echo. I heard through the grapevine that she and her husband had moved in with his parents temporarily, that she was applying for jobs, though the market wasn't being kind, that some of the people who had laughed that night were no longer returning her calls. It was never about revenge for me. It was about letting the world teach the lesson I had been too afraid to enforce. She had spent so long assuming I would never walk away. That blood would keep the engine running no matter how often she slashed the tires. But love without respect is just fuel being stolen. And I was done being siphoned dry. On a Sunday afternoon, weeks after the house sold and the calls stopped, I took a walk through the neighborhood. Same path I used to take when Leah was little, when she'd ride her bike beside me and ask me endless questions about the clouds, the squirrels, the way seasons changed. I passed a young family playing in their front yard, their daughter squealing with delight as she tossed leaves into the air. Her father laughed and scooped her up, spinning her in a dizzy circle until they both collapsed onto the grass. For a moment, my throat tightened, not out of envy, but out of memory. That had been us, once. pure, unbroken, and full of possibility. But time moves, and love, when not returned, doesn't stay soft forever. It hardens into distance, into caution, into choice. I had chosen myself this time, not out of spite, not out of bitterness, but out of survival. And as I watched the wind sweep the last of the leaves into a swirling dance across the pavement, I realized something important. I didn't regret my decision, not even for a second. When a parent finally stands up for themselves after years of being disrespected, it's not revenge, it's self-preservation. I didn't cut her off to be cruel. I did it because I was done begging for basic respect. What would you have done in my place? Was I too harsh, or did Leah push too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story hit home for you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real stories about boundaries, betrayal, and what happens when enough is finally enough. See you soon in the next story.